Danse, bonjour, and hello. My name is Raven Sky, and I am very glad to be offering this land acknowledgement today. I just want to start off by saying I am currently located on the traditional lands of the Algonquin people, specifically the Algonquin people of Pikwakton. The Algonquin people have never signed a treaty, therefore their land is unceded. I want to begin also by acknowledging that no matter which way we portray how the land we are standing on now came to be, we have to acknowledge that it is stolen land. It has never not been stolen land, and it will never not be stolen land. Even if papers were signed, if hands were shaken, this land was never taken or given peacefully or consensually. I also want to honor the many amazing accomplishments of Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people in this country. It is very hard to survive the atrocities that have been put in front of us, not just to survive through them, but also to survive the aftermath and fallout. It takes courage and grace, traits that we have exhibited time and time again. I'll ask that you take a moment to think. Think about where you are, and not just where you're sitting or where you're standing, but where you are, where you live every day. Who stood before you? What happened to them, and where are their descendants now? Because all of the atrocities that happened didn't end with our ancestors, we as Indigenous people are still here. We are not artifacts and we are not history. We are modern and constantly adapting to the world around us. Acknowledge that everything on Turtle Island has Indigenous influence, even if you can't see it. As a country, we have an obligation to be caretakers and stewards of the land. That means treating it respectfully and with deep care and appreciation. We should follow the example led by the stewards before us, whose practices were not only sustainable, but who also cared for the land as if it was part of their family.
Hello and thank you for joining us. My name is Quinn Rafi Antoine and I am the Indigenous Initiatives and Training Lead at the Gord Downey and Channy Wenjack Fund. Inspired by Channy's story and Gord's call to build a better Canada, we aim to build cultural understanding and create a path towards reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It's great to be here for a special DWF Live with Larissa Crawford, founder of Future Ancestors. Larissa is a published Indigenous anti-racism and climate justice researcher, policy advisor, and restorative circle keeper with 16 years of experience. She is the founder of Future Ancestors, a next-generation speakers bureau representing diverse entrepreneurs responding to our most pressing systemic challenges. Her work has been recognized with accolades, including the York University One to Watch Alumni Award, Women of Influence's Top 25, Corporate Knights Top 30 Under 30 in Sustainability, York University's Top 30 Under 30 Changemakers, and the Pollution Probe Equity in Sustainability Award. Today, Larissa will join us to share her perspectives on Earth Day. Larissa, welcome, and miigwech for joining us. I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Dase, bonjour, hello. I'm so excited to be here speaking with y'all. I'm personally calling in from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, as well as Métis Nation Homeland Region 3. I'd say beyond my role as a laborer, I love rock climbing, I love ribbon skirt making, and I really enjoy learning about the traditional territories on which I live. I love fungi, I love plants, and understanding kind of the medicines that we gain from our relationships to Earth.
Thank you so much for that introduction. We have some questions to dive deeper into the amazing work you're doing. For those tuning in, please feel free to add your comments and questions in the chat. Larissa, could you start by sharing what Earth Day means to you personally and why it's such an important day to reflect on?
If you think to a lot of your biology textbooks or how we're taught to think about nature, we're often taught to think about ecosystems, to look at nature with humans outside of that ecosystem. Oftentimes we're taught to see ourselves as separate and usually above a natural ecosystem. We're not taught to see ourselves as apex predators. We're not taught to think of the impact we're having within an ecosystem. Because when we're studying ecosystems, when we're studying the natural world, we are always encouraged to recognize that what happens in one group or with one species or with one kind of plant life, that will impact the rest of the ecosystem, whether there's an abundance or a lack thereof. Now, by removing humans from that ecosystem and equation, we're separating ourselves from the impact we're having on Earth. We're separating ourselves from the responsibility we have to our kin, human and non-human. And so I really feel like Earth Day is a time, a space to really consciously bring ourselves into our understanding of that ecosystem, whether that's your natural cultural way of thinking. And that's definitely how I was brought up. Those are the teachings I carry. But if you don't have or you haven't had that kind of cultural or educational access and experience, then this is a great time to start or to continue your journey on exploring what does that mean to be within an ecosystem, not separate or above an ecosystem.
Thank you. Your work mentions the importance of ancestral accountability. Can you share more about what that concept means and how it relates to Earth Day's theme of our planet and our power?
Mm-hmm. So I've traveled a lot around the world for my work, education, volunteering, and one beautiful thing that I've personally found that has made me feel connected to pretty much any Indigenous people around the world are teachings of ancestry and ancestral accountability. So how I like to understand ancestral accountability is that we look to the past with an awareness and through the lens of actions and inactions, with the purpose of understanding how those actions and inactions have shaped our realities today, the realities we've inherited. Because what that does is it allows us to better position ourselves to reflect on our own actions and inactions and how that's not only shaping our realities today, but the realities for future generations, non-human kin, and Earth. Now, there's a responsibility tied to that. And that responsibility requires the skills and awareness of looking to the past to really evaluate how we're shaping the future. Now, on Earth Day, that's what this is all about, is looking to not only our present, but to the future and bringing that into our understanding of a stakeholder or our moral kind of circle of what we should care about. So ancestral accountability has everything to do with Earth Day. And I really love connecting it with climate justice, climate change work, because it requires us to add an element of personal commitment and connection to the work. It's not just about tech. It's not just about the statistics. It's not just about the science or the policies. It's also about our personal connections to this work. I have two daughters, Zaira and Atea, and when I look to them, I see our future personified. So one element of Earth Day that I think is really, we can really learn a lot about in connecting it with ancestral accountability is the importance of intergenerational collaboration in spaces as we move through this work. To have an elder and a child in the same room is a great example of acting out and really creating a space where we can best achieve an understanding of what our ancestral accountability is, looking to the past to understand the future. And so I think Earth Day has everything to do with ancestral accountability. And the more we connect that, the deeper of a personal connection we can bring to this work.
Thank you so much. You've dedicated a lot of your work to climate justice and anti-racism. How do you see these two issues being connected, particularly in Indigenous communities?
Yeah, okay. So climate justice and anti-racism. I like to look way back to really underscore this connection. So if we think of why Canada was created in the first place, Canada as a nation state, we were settled for the purpose of God, glory, and gold, for the expansion of empire, for the expansion of religious conquest, and for the extraction and control of natural resources, to pump them into a growing global economy. Now, if we think of what are like the historical roots of why we wanted land claims, why we wanted institutions to justify those land claims, why we wanted an RCMP to control those lands. If we look back to that history, we see that so many of our institutions are rooted in the interest of exploiting natural resources and controlling them. Now, one of the biggest threats to that was seeing humans as equal, was not having a system of inferiority and superiority to justify the killing, the genocides, the rape, the slavery of my ancestors, the indigenous peoples who were stolen from Western Africa and brought to the Americas via the transatlantic slave trade, my ancestors here. And so when we think about how we were able to exploit those natural resources, it was through enslavement, and it was through the violent removal and genocide of our peoples, my peoples. And so when we connect that and we think, okay, how did they create those systems of inferiority and superiority? There are a lot of ways. We saw that through race science. So, for example, phrenology, the study of skulls, and saying these skulls are actually full human. We deserve voting rights and we deserve to own property. But these skulls, the skulls of, for example, Africans, these are actually closer to monkeys. So it's okay if we treat them this way because biologically, they're not the same as us. So race science, in that example, phrenology, was used to classify a human existence within superiority, inferiority complexes. We see that day to day, though. We see that in our relationships to time, where someone who is punctual and productive and who is pumping out work after work after work, that is seen as valuable, that is seen as civilized, that is seen as the epitome of class and character. Whereas someone who may be more attuned with seasonal rest cycles, who may not be as punctual and may follow more natural rhythms. Oftentimes we talk about ADHD time or autistic time, where punctuality maybe isn't the leading way that someone lives their life. They're often going to be positioned as, oh, they're a nuisance. Oh, they're a problem. They're difficult to work with. So cultural experiences of time, Indian time, African time, island time, those are all often positioned, especially in what is currently Canada, as being a nuisance, as being too difficult to deal with. That is part of the process of creating an inferiority-superiority complex along racial and cultural lines. And again, why do we need to understand people in this way? Well, it goes back to and connects to that mission, that intent to control and maintain and exploit natural resources. Indigenous peoples, we are a threat to that. And so when we are on the land, when we are collectively organized, when we are using the land outside of government or institutional systems, we carry a power with that. And we carry a reciprocal relationship with that. That's a threat to, again, natural resource extraction and control. And so in order to remove us from our territories, in order to delegitimize our knowledge, we see these systems of inferiority and superiority. So the root causes of why we need climate justice, the root causes of why we need anti-racism and to dismantle systemic racism, when we see and connect those root causes, we can see and identify how these two supposedly different efforts are actually require a connected kind of approach. And so that's why I always bring in social justice work into my climate justice work and vice versa.
Thank you so much. I think that serves as a reminder of how connected we are to the land, and that is powerful. How do you think Indigenous knowledge and cultural teachings can contribute to the global movement for renewable energy and sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, that's really at the basis of what we're doing. And if you look at anywhere around the world, at least from my understanding, Indigenous people are the ones leading renewable energy efforts, especially. I think it's also important to really look at what they're doing as innovation and what we're doing as innovation. And the way I like to think of innovation is not just the new technology we see coming out of these communities, but why I believe Indigenous peoples are so innovative when it comes to renewable energy and sustainability is because we're applying our traditional teachings and ways of being in our contemporary contexts. So it's not saying we have to go back in time, but it's saying how can we use the lessons, can we use the wisdom of the past for the betterment of our present and futures. And that to me is innovation. It's a novel application of old knowledge. And I think that the more we move forward in our understanding of innovation in renewable energy and sustainability with that effort to look back to understand how to go forward, we're going to be better positioned to, in many ways, return to more sustainable ways of being. Because for time immemorial, our peoples were living sustainably within ecosystems. And if we look to history, as humans removed ourselves and removed themselves further and further from our understanding of being within nature and being a part of nature, we see a movement towards climate and environmental degradation. And so if we are positioning and centering Indigenous knowledges, and many of us carry Indigenous knowledges, and when I say Indigenous knowledge, like I include, and I'm speaking about a global context, I include Blackness in my understanding of indigeneity. Many of us whose ancestors have come to or have been brought to what is currently North America, we were Indigenous peoples that were stolen from Indigenous lands. We've been disconnected from our Indigenous knowledges. So what does it mean to understand ourselves as disconnected Indigenous peoples, and what does it mean to honor that, and what does it mean to hold space to restore the harm that's been caused? So for me, I know that's kind of off topic, but it also isn't, because the more we hold space for our understanding of indigeneity and our returning to these teachings, the stronger our efforts are in renewable energy and sustainability. And I think that's why land camps, that's why language courses, that's why elder circles are so significant and important to invest in and to hold space for Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples, because everyone can benefit from these knowledge systems.
I agree. Thank you so much. You're working to remove systemic barriers that prevent marginalized communities from being heard.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for students who want to challenge these systems and be a part of creating a more equitable future?
Yeah. So my advice to students is definitely own the power that you have. And when I say that, I mean, I was really young when I started entering international policy spaces, talking about environmental and social justice work. And so I'd often find myself, like, as young as 12 years old, in rooms of politicians and ministers, teachers, superintendents, um, having a voice. And it was really easy to feel like I shouldn't belong there. It was really easy. And it's still really easy. I just did a panel full of doctors and I only have one undergrad degree. And I look around the room and I think it would be so easy for me to feel unqualified to be here. And one thing that I really encourage you to do, and that's really helped me navigate these spaces where imposter syndrome, where silencing, where people have actively tried to silence me in these spaces, being able to resist that in these spaces has really come from preparing myself for that and really deeply understanding where my qualification comes from. So I want to encourage you to think about how your lived experiences and how your identities also contribute to your qualification to be a climate activist, to hold the space that you have where you're at. You have and carry such valuable wisdom and knowledge. As youth, there are more and more spaces being carved out for you. And as you enter and take up space, especially in those youth designated spaces, I'd say continue and use that as an opportunity to really articulate why being young, why having the next several decades and having the plan for the next several decades is a qualification for you to speak on something. Think about the adversities you've overcome or are navigating. What are you learning from that? What perspective are you gaining from that? What did you learn about maybe not successfully navigating that? And how does that qualify you to be there? When I was working at a provincial ministry of energy, I ended up getting the job, which I was technically unqualified for because of the way I was able to position my lived experience as a crucial element of that work. Not a single other person on the team was Indigenous, but also people weren't coming from an experience of poverty where they hadn't lived with energy or electricity. They weren't coming from a place of community research and engagement where they've been in the communities that we were serving, that they belong to and understand what's going on in those communities. So I was able to leverage those lived experiences to say, these are important perspectives that need to be brought to our considerations when we're creating policies and programming. And so positioning your lived experience as something that, and identities as qualification, is something that no one can take away from you. And so when you take the time to write that out in your cover letters, in your biographies, to write that out in Instagram captions, or even just practicing it and explaining it with a friend, or explaining it to a friend and having them explain back, just saying it out loud and practicing it is the way that I've been able to build a sense of confidence, where I very rarely experienced imposter syndrome, but I'm very aware that I could, and maybe sometimes even should, feel that way. And it's because I've really deepened my connection to my value that's rooted in something that isn't affirmed by an institution or a resume. It's informed by what I'm living every day and what I have lived and where I've come from.
Thank you for that empowering message. I think it will really instill some confidence in young people. For our last question, what message would you like to share with young people today, especially as they learn more about the importance of Earth Day and the power they have to make a difference in the world?
you are a future ancestor whether you want to acknowledge it or not. You're having an impact on not only today, but tomorrow. And it's your decision, it's your choice, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. We're all existing within the living legacies of our predecessors, of our ancestors. And in many ways, we're suffering the consequences of those legacies, the harmful ones. We also carry the resilience and the strength of other living legacies. And so, as future ancestors, we need to be consciously choosing what kind of living legacies we're going to be contributing to, which ones we're going to be dismantling and stopping. And I think Earth Day is a really opportune time to position Earth and to reflect on Earth within those living legacies that you are shaping, that you are leaving, and that hopefully you're stopping in some ways as well. And so as we celebrate Earth Day as a conscious future ancestor. Celebrate Earth Day with an understanding that we can look to the past to understand what our future can look like. And celebrate Earth Day with perhaps a commitment to one changed behavior, whether that be educating yourself monthly on an Earth Day, an Earth-related or sustainability-related event or article. Shape and choose carefully who you follow on social media, because who you follow on social media shapes your daily truth and reality. And so consciously start following Earth activists and Earth institutions, sustainability institutions. And then really, again, commit to change behavior. I'd say also look into how maybe seasonally you can be making commitments to time to honoring your connection to Earth. So that could be looking like taking 2 walks a week outside, or making sure that every week your feet touch the earth, like touch grass or dirt. It could look like doing a hike a month, or getting out to a national park or provincial park. Now, I also know that there are many barriers that prevent a lot of us from being able to physically access the outdoors, but we can still honor our relationships to Earth inside as well, whether that be planting a plant or having a small garden, reading a book. I just read a really great book on fungi, and I usually try to have 1 or 2 books on the go that have to do with our relationship to Earth or plant knowledge and natural knowledge. So there are a lot of different ways to commit to one changed behavior, but I think Earth Day is a great day to start doing that. So what does that one changed behavior look like? And then again, moving forward with those commitments with an understanding that you too are a future ancestor.
Amazing. And thank you so much for all of those examples. And thank you for being here. Thanks to all of those who've tuned in today. You can head to downeywenjack.ca/DWF live for a list of our upcoming sessions and to look back on past sessions as well. Miigwech, and have a great day.